Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar today. My name is Alexandra Alvarado. I'm the Director of Marketing and Education at the American Apartment Owners Association. Today, we have with us Sneha Lakkaraju. She is from Notifii, which is a fantastic platform. We'll talk about it more at the end of the webinar. But first, I'm going to start with a little bit about Sneha so you can get to know her. She has 8 years in growth marketing, servicing clients across commercial real estate, enterprise tech, and startup spaces. She's been with Notifii for 2 years, and she is currently their marketing director. She's going to have a lot to show us about communications. She clearly has a lot of experience in marketing and how to speak to people. And so we've applied that now to the rental space, hoping to teach you something new about how you can use those skills to get your tenants to actually pay you rent on time. It is a bit of a psychological game. I'm sure we're going to get into that. But before we begin, I do want to share just a couple of things. We do have a chat box and a Q&A. In the chat, you can go ahead and put in, if you can hear everything okay. Feel free to mention, where you're coming in from. We'd love to hear that. In the question box, make sure to put your questions. If you put them in the chat, I might miss them, so make sure you put them in the question box. And we'll get to the questions at the very end of the webinar. If for some reason we don't get to your questions, we will be sure to forward them over to Sneha, and she can follow up with you after the webinar. And of course, as usual, the whole thing is being recorded, so we will send it to you tomorrow. So give it about 24 hours. We'll send you the recording as well as the PowerPoint slides and Sneha's information. So if you did want to get in touch after, you certainly can. So this will be about a 45 to 60-minute webinar. Sneha, I am going to hand this off to you to get started. Thank you so much for joining us and for being here today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Alexandra, and for that wonderful introduction. As Alexandra mentioned, my name is Sneha, and I am the marketing director over at Notifii. And we focus on helping property managers communicate more effectively with their residents. And the issue of late payments and delinquencies is something that we across the industry have had to face, especially over the past few years. When we think about communication for between residents, 84% of property managers feel that they engage with their residents appropriately, but only 23% of residents agree with that. And what does that really show us when we take a look at those numbers? It shows us that we may not be meeting our residents where they like to communicate and how they like to communicate. And there's an extra layer of this when it comes to payments. Most common reasons for late payments that property managers usually hear from their residents: a loss of employment, family emergencies, child needs, bank issues. There's a quite a long list that you could possibly hear. And at the end of the day, over the past 2 years, thanks to COVID, there's about $20 billion in unpaid rent debt in the United States itself. And now that these eviction moratoriums have been lifted, we have to prepare for trying to get back to the normal state of things and collecting on those late payments. So some changes because of COVID to try to help that. 50% more renters now use mobile payments for rent. But just between May 12th and August 4th, 2021, there was a 15% increase in renters behind on rent and a 30% increase in people who felt like they were very likely to be evicted if it were not for the eviction moratoriums. There is an estimated $6.6 billion in lost earnings if the total number of people who've reported that they feel they are at risk of eviction really do wind up getting evicted, and a $5 billion number in increased debt for those same tenants. So it's pretty critical here that not only are we communicating to get that rental income back in, but also that we're working with our residents and tenants to make that happen. Turnover is very expensive, and if we can avoid it, we want to avoid it. So we're going to work on some strategies together today to help make sure that we can retain as many residents as possible and provide them the tools to be able to pay rent on time. So now that the moratoriums are over, the strategy that we'll be going over is just the 3 R's: resources, reminders, and records. And we'll talk a little bit about the do's and don'ts of these, and a little bit more technical details specifically for reminders and how you can make the best of those direct communications to your residents. So jumping into the 3 R's. The first one is resources, and you'll see here in the italics that are relevant. That is the name of the game. You can have all sorts of links sent out to your residents on your monthly newsletter. You could have a whole page on your website with them, but really you want to focus in on the key day-to-day sorts of support that are available for your residents and the most relevant information on how they get their rent to you. So making sure you order them in the correct way. Really great way to consistently showcase that you have these resources available and you want to work with your residents is make sure at the very bottom of every email you send out, that may be a newsletter, it could be just a one-on-one email, you have a link to those resources and order it, your rental policies, a local assistance website for renters assistance, for rental payment assistance, job boards, food assistance programs, childcare. Those are the really core expenses that a family really may need help addressing before they can handle their rent. In a couple of the studies that were conducted that we cited in the earlier slides, they also mentioned that people who were struggling to pay rent or may have deferred paying rent for a month or two prioritize things like groceries and childcare before they went and made their rental payment, now that there was the eviction moratorium. With that in mind, the resources you provide should be focused on those types of items. So while they get that supplemental assistance, they can still get their rent to you. There's an additional layer to this aside from just having those resources available in hopes that they look in there. It changes the dynamic of rent collection. Nobody likes to pay bills. No one likes the bill man. It is not fun to get that phone call when they're asking for you to pay your bill. This makes it a little less harsh of a communication. You want to showcase that you care for your residents, that you want them to be able to stay in the community still. So having these readily available, reiterating where to find them on your website, in your emails, even flyers or business cards down in the office helps make sure that you have that sort of caring tone to every sort of communication that you send out and makes you more approachable. If someone is likely to be late on rent, the best case scenario is you find out why. So being able to be caring and break down that wall between the collections person and the person who owes rent does help open up that communication and increase the likelihood that at least you'll hear back from that resident. Some general do's and don'ts: do keep the resources available and include links to them in general messages. Don't assume your residents already know where to find these on your website. And it should be a very consistent sort of reminder that you have these resources available in these specific areas. For those residents who aren't necessarily consistently checking your website or reading all the emails that you're sending out, they're going to need that reminder. If they have questions about rent and your on-site managers are tackling those questions in person, have them point out where they can find these sorts of resources on the website, or point out where they are physically in the space if you have flyers and business cards. Do keep an open line of response. Don't fail to respond to inquiries. It's very likely that someone will come across one of the resource links on your pages and have further questions about them, or how that particular assistance program works with your property, or even on your policies, like resources about late payments, resources about how they can make payments. The quicker you can respond, the more back and forth there are, the more likely is that that resident will stay engaged and figure out how to get that payment to you. Do include non-rent related relief. It is not just about rent, as I mentioned before. Focus around everything that are the core largest household expenses that may be preventing somebody from paying rent as additional resources to provide. You can focus on them on the city or the county level. Sometimes there's assistance on the state levels. Local generally does do better, easier to understand, and for intake as well. They just have a lot more boots on the ground to help intake folks. So, you can even reach out to your local branch of assistance relief and they'll be able to get you the right resources that you need. You might be able to get a primary contact to refer residents to if they are in need of that relief, but you want to make sure that it's not just about housing, that there are other items there as well. And then do include physical and printed resources. Now, this is contrary to everything Notifii is saying, print it out. But for some folks, printing it out is great. And it's also a really passive way to get the message across. If someone's in person talking to a property manager about, struggling to get the next payment and, passing over a few of these flyers may be super helpful. Having a little area within the office where these are displayed so someone can grab it and walk away without having a conversation is also a really great passive way to provide the information without having an uncomfortable conversation. The links do that same thing as well, but we have all sorts of diverse residents. So maybe some of the older residents would find these sorts of resources printed out, physical with a phone number on it, far more approachable than a link that you send via email. But definitely do not only do printed. You want a mix of both. Okay. Related to that, we talked a lot about the emails when it comes to resources and having flyers printed out, things of that sort. A really big key here is reminders. There are quite a few different properties who just do not send rent reminders that the rent payment is coming up. It's just standard, expected to come in on the 1st. For several different people, having that additional reminder does help them plan, does help them prepare in order to make the payment. It also reminds them how to make the payment. And that is generally one of the biggest things that is forgotten when sending out that reminder. It's just, your rent payment is due, here's how much it is, pay now. But we would want to provide a little bit more context. And this is also a great place in these reminders to provide those resources that we were just talking about. One thing to think about with reminders is that your medium matters, whether it's automated emails, automated text messages. Do you have an FAQ section or an autoresponder that residents can send messages to and instantly get a response? Do your residents have the ability to text your property managers or call them? Is there one reliable email that all inquiries go into, or are there separate emails for each one of your property managers? Things to think about: on average, SMS messages have an open rate of 90%. In the property management space, email messages have an open rate of about 42%. That's a massive difference. SMS messages also have a 90-second response rate. Email messages have a 90-minute plus response rate. So when you want to elicit a response, get an answer, see something done, really think about how you're sending this out so you can get the most effective response or the most effective next step from your residents. Automations are really powerful tools, and now many property management softwares, many communication software have enabled automations via text and via email to help you in this rent collection flow. What's important to realize here is that this is still technically some form of internal marketing. You're just marketing to your current residents rather than a prospect. So you want to follow the same sort of baseline marketing rules. First, setting the stage, then building value, then directly asking for the sale, creating a sense of urgency, and then playing on a fear of losing out. It's a pretty standard marketing flow that a lot of different marketers utilize today across email marketing, text message marketing, and even things like advertising. We just want to tweak what these mean and the content that goes in to still fit this formula, but make it very focused on already existing obligation to pay rent. First, in setting the stage, this is background information. We're setting expectations. Rent is due by what date, by what time, in what method. What do they do if they cannot pay? You want to have it set up in a way where the focus of the email or the text message is going to be that exact payment and the call to action, but the rest of the details should be available there. And the language should be not necessarily focused on that sense of urgency, but hey, we're informing you. This is the background information here. Building value is a little bit difficult in this second stage. If you have things like late fees or even social repercussions for late payments, our team will contact you if your payment is late. Those sorts of things help build value to paying your rent on time. This is something that should be carefully worded and possibly include links to your policies, also links for them to come and ask further questions. The third email or text would be a direct call to action. Directly ask for the payment with the additional details available, but not the focus. So this would be a good example of just saying, hey, your rent is due today. Hey, your rent is due in 3 days. Pay now, with a link to it. And your entire footer be a link to these resources available. And there should be a call out for a direct line to anybody who could answer questions. 4 is our sense of urgency. This is all about the dates. The dates should be the number one thing on there. They should be the most highlighted, maybe in red. You just want to draw attention to the fact that the date is coming up and that we need to make sure the payment is coming in on time, including some of those value repercussions in that email can also be utilized, but you want to focus on that sense of urgency. Time is coming up. You need to move now. It's kind of like, think of, in a traditional marketing sense, the countdown clock that were used on plenty of landing pages that you might line up in. The sale is ending in 1 hour and 20 minutes. You've got 1 hour and 20 minutes to pay. You want to take that sort of messaging, that sort of emotion that's brought into it, and include it in this 4th step. And last is FOMO, fear of missing out, fear that they are going to essentially face some of those repercussions or face some of those social repercussions. And you want to state those in the email. We're still taking that same sort of call to action, like date, call to action, resources, but you want to state those repercussions first. So you want to note that after today, if the payment is not made, this is what's going to happen. Please pay your rent here, and provide a link to do so or instructions to do so. Because these tools are incredibly popular, it's a great time to note. We noticed 50% more renters are now paying their bill on mobile or online. This makes it much, much easier to use automations in conjunction with an online payment portal. They work very, very well together. You'll be able to send links out immediately for them to log in and make their payments, because there is an extra step in this for the actual renter outside of clicking a link. If they do need to go fill out a physical check and drop it off to you, or go get a cashier's check and drop it off to you. Eliminating that step allows for these to do their best work, which is elicit the emotion right as they read it and then act on it. Some do's and don'ts when it comes to automations and reminders overall. Send your messages from multiple mediums. Don't do all text message, all email, all phone calls. Try Every resident is different. Every person is different. They're going to resonate with one over the other, or maybe they might resonate with two of them. They saw the email the first time, they saw the text the next time, they make their rent payment. You want to make sure you cover your bases, but don't exceed a frequency of more than 2 per week. So if you are going to send email and text, send the email on Monday, send the text on Wednesday. Hitting them far too many times doesn't elicit an emotion about the actual content itself. You're making them annoyed at just all the messages coming through, and can be intimidating and shut someone down. One of the goals here, like we mentioned with the resources, is open line of communication. So we don't want them to close themselves off because they feel like they're being hunted down for this payment. Good transition to the second do. Keep an open line of response. And this is basically like one of the biggest things you could possibly do, is just make sure if they have questions, they know who to speak to. Notifii Connect, for example, and we'll talk about it a little bit down the line, but for any of the text message reminders that go out, they can respond and it goes straight to a property manager's app, and they can go ahead and respond right then and there. There's no additional phone number, no additional email. They could just do it right there. In your emails that are sent out, send your reply to email to the appropriate person within the office or general inbox. So whomever is working on site that day can respond quickly and promptly. Include a phone number. Let your residents call in and ask ask specific questions, and make sure that after the email is sent out, for the next 1 to 2 hours, someone is available there to take in any questions. You want to space out your communications as well. Essentially not sending them one day at a time. Give a little bit of room there. There's also people who have such filled inboxes, such filled text inboxes, or had a busy schedule at work and didn't see your phone call, that they need a little time to respond. So ideally, you want to give 1 to 2 days space minimum and a week space max, so you can continuously send out these messages, but not hit them so hard that they feel like they're receiving far too many and clam up. But don't start sending them too late. Aim for about 10 days prior to when rent is due and space it out from there. You can space it out even further, but then we're so far from the deadline that you may not get that elicited response that you need. Use dynamic placeholders. These are great. Most tools provide them. Most email services use them. Not all the text messages services utilize them, but this is where you can take people's first name or last name, the unit number, and then drop it in there. And that works as a placeholder. When you hit send, it'll auto-populate those fields. Some tools refer to them as merge tags, but they're really important. They make it feel personalized. They also help the resident identify that this is specific to them and means that they have to do something. It is not a general announcement. Don't use formal names though. If you can do this, it'll go a super long way. If your resident, let's say his name is Michael, prefers to be called Mike, and this has been told to you, it's in your property management software already, make sure it says Mike in the email. It makes such a huge difference. It makes it personable. They're more likely to respond to it because you're addressing them the way they prefer to be addressed, and also likely how they're addressed on the day-to-day. So that initial, when they're reading it back to themselves, it has more of a impact. It resonates with them slightly more than it would if it not. Do create automations that work with your property management tool or your master record. Integrations are fantastic. Rather than manually inputting things left and right and trying to keep all your records straight across multiple platforms, try to just take what you currently have and make sure it works together. Don't forget to keep these records updated though. So if everything is in one place and those records aren't regularly updated, then it's not really going to work in your favor. You can send out emails or texts to somebody who's no longer a resident. You can send out a lease move out date when on the incorrect day. You just want to make sure that these are maintained by someone on your team. Cool. Jumping into our last R, so we've got our resources, telling everybody where to go for some additional help with things like food assistance, job boards, rental assistance. We've got our reminders telling everybody that hey, your rent is due, and also including some of those resources. And now we've got our records, and this is critical if you need to take that next step or if you need to hold your renters more accountable. It's making sure that every single communication, and this includes about rent and other outside of that, if you're sending community promotions, if you're taking a look at maintenance, all of it should be saved somewhere. Keep record of all your communications regarding late payments, especially. It protects you legally and assists in managing future communications with specific residents. So for example, we talked a little bit how every resident is different. You'll be able to see if you can in your tool, pull up which of these mediums they respond to the most frequently or open the most frequently. So if you really need an answer or payment from a specific resident, you can send one-off messages to that particular resident. That way you have the data to do so. You want to keep all these records specific to units in addition to their contacts. So there may be a family of four adults living in one of your rental units. You want to make sure that the records aren't just specific to each individual living there, it's specific to their unit number as well. So if there are multiple attempts to collect from all four persons, you can show that, hey, that 5 touch is actually technically a 20 touch because you reach all 4 residents and reminded them several times. You also want to track all mediums. If you are sending texts, emails, and phone calls, you want to keep record of all 3 of those. Phone calls are a little bit more difficult. Not every property management team records them. It is encouraged that you do record them, but if not, just keep record of it. Include it, kind of treat it like a CRM tool in your property management software or in your master record that on this day called, left a message regarding X, Y, and Z at this time, just to keep that record there if you need it for future reference. And then the most important thing is make sure you tell your residents that you're keeping records of these things. So they know that they're encouraged to respond back to you and be truthful, because they'll understand that these are records that you are keeping for future reference. All right, so we've got our 3 R's. We've got our resources, we've got our reminders, we've got our records. Now we need something to actually execute these with. So want to introduce Notifii Connect a little bit. It is our resident communications tool where we can accomplish these 3 R's. So we'll talk a little bit about what we can do here and do a little bit of a demo. Before we get there, Alexandra, why don't we start off with our poll question?
Okay there, I have it up on the screen. So if you're interested in learning more about SMS tools for property managers, you can say yes or no, thank you there. And that will help us kind of determine how to lead the discussion moving forward. So I'll give you guys about a minute to answer that. But so far, Sneha, really interesting information. I love how you've used some stats to really support the need for communication and the different ways to communicate with tenants. I think it's something that's often overlooked, is that we don't communicate in like one way anymore. There are so many different ways to get in touch with people, and everyone has their own preference for how to do that. And so it's good to have some options there, I think. Okay. All righty. So it looks like we have 64% say yes, 36% no. So that should give you an idea of kind of where to take the discussion. 67 now on the yeses, so it's creeping up a little, but seems like the majority of you are a little bit interested, at least in learning about these SMS tools.
Wonderful. So we'll dive into Notifii Connect. If anyone has questions along the way, we will have the Q&A session again towards the end. But if you have questions along the way, feel free to start dropping them in the Q&A box so we can go back and refer to answer any of your questions along the way. And again, if we don't get to your question, we'll be sending them over to my inbox. So I'll be able to get back to you with some answers there. So about Notifii, we were created in 2009 and focused in on the package management software Notifii Track. This was really focused on your mailroom and scanning in packages and sending out a text and email to your residents saying, hey, your package is ready. And we got such an overwhelming response from our property management clients saying, hey, can we just get like the email and text message tool? Because we feel like that would be super helpful across the board, which is where we came in and created Notifii Connect. You'll notice on the registration, we did ask if anyone wanted to participate in our demo today by providing an SMS number. I think we had 12 to 14 people say, yeah, they'd like to participate. So I'm just going to give you a quick little walkthrough of what this basically looks like. Prior to the webinar, when I got all the phone numbers, I went into our contact list and I added into our current resident list a number of folks who had signed up for the webinar. And if you have a property management software, you probably wouldn't come in here and upload a list. You'll likely integrate with your property management software. So that list will already be in here with details like lease end date, lease start date, birthdays, whatever you're saving in your property management software tool, you can pull into Notifii as well and use those to inform your automations. Once I got you guys into our system, I went ahead and created, where are you? A recipient group. So you guys are our AAOA webinar recipient group, and I organized you by your unit numbers. For every single person on the call, you are an AAOA unit number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc., etc. So now we've got that set up. Let's see what sending a text message looks like, at least from the desktop. On the app, this very much so looks like you're sending a normal text message. You go open up the Messengers app, you pick the audience you want to send it to or the individual you want to send it to, and you shoot it out. In our case, since we're sending it from desktop, we're going to say we want to send it to a current resident group. And then we want it to be our AAOA webinar folks. In this case, we are not going to send an email message, but we are going to send a text. And I'm going to say, hi, first name, thanks for joining our webinar with AAOA today. If you would like to learn more, visit www.notifii.com. So you'll notice here with our placeholders, this is a whole bunch of other information here. So you can pull in unit number, you can pull in your account name. So in this case would be your property's name, any email contacts that you want to provide to them, phone numbers, your maintenance phone number, your office hours. You can create a signature for text messages, a link to your resident portal, which is great in the case of rent collections. Hey, log in, pay your rent. Custom text, that's something that you can create yourself and save as a placeholder, or your website. On the recipient side of things, this is based on the information that we already have saved in the system. Because we're using the example of the attendees today, we don't necessarily have a lease start date, a lease end date, things of that sort to include in the system. So those options aren't shown here, but they can be used as placeholders. So now that we've got that set up, I'm going to go ahead and send this message. And As you guys receive the message, just leave a little note in the chat box if you've received it. Oh, I forgot to put a message name on there. Okay, we should be good now. All right. Sent out. So as you get your messages, just leave a little note in the chat box that you've gotten it. But now we'll be able to see too, if they click on the link that we sent via text message. Well, if we emailed them, we'll be able to see if they opened the email. We get all sorts of stats sent here. We'll also be able to see that on our dashboard. When we open it up, how many messages did we send this month? How many emails did we send this month? How many texts?
I think this is really cool. I'm just popping in to make a comment. I think that one thing that is interesting to me is, we often try to communicate with people not knowing if they did in fact receive it, because people get so many emails and texts and whatnot, or they might claim they never received it. But you'd be able to see on this platform proof that they saw it and they opened it and they received it. Okay, so I'm sure, just a question from my end, does it tell you if the the phone number doesn't exist or if the email wasn't received, like if it was a bad email?
Yes. So we do have in our reports a unsubscribe, and we'll also have a monthly summary, which will also show if you've bounced. So if any of the emails are incorrect or no longer exist, you'll have that information. And we do validate the phone numbers. So the way our text messages work, before it actually sends out, we'll get a little bit, it'll pause. And if that phone number doesn't exist, it won't send the message. And then you'll get a report after the message is sent to say, hey, just so you know, that's not really their phone number.
That's really great, because that's often an issue that I know a lot of our members have, is making sure that they have up-to-date records on people, because usually tenants don't bother to tell landlords when they change their phone number or their email. And then when you need to get a hold of them, it's pretty much impossible. So this is really great. I love this. So as Sneha said, if you want to put your questions in the question box, go ahead and start putting in some questions there. Otherwise, I'll probably keep asking questions. I'm a curious person and I've never seen your platform before. So this is actually really interesting to me. Maybe it's my marketing background too, but I really think this is a great tool for landlords.
Yeah. And just to point this out, so thanks, Polly, for responding to the text, because I get to show this. If you send those mass text messages out, they show up to you just from one phone number. And when you respond, you can go into our chat texting section and then continue having the conversation. So I appreciate the response and keep the conversation going. These chat sessions or text sessions are saved for 5 years on our platform. You can export it anytime. And what's great is that same sort of record maintenance that we were talking about before, having it by contact and by unit, is how you can export this information if you ever need it.
Really nice. A question from one of our attendees here saying that they only have a handful of homes. Is this still for me? So I know we probably have a mix of people on the call now. Some that might have a lot of units, others just a few. Is it okay if somebody just has a few units that they want to manage on this?
Yeah, so our pricing depends on how much you're going to use it. So it's tiered depending on the number of homes you're working with or contacts you're working with. We'll come up with a pricing plan that works best for you. And what's great is we have a 14-day free trial, so you can see if you get really the benefit out of it. If it turns out you don't, you can go ahead and stop service there. Or if you want to continue for a few months, you can. No long-term contracts. When you realize if you were not really getting the benefit out of it that you expected, you can cancel at any time.
That's great. That's great. So tomorrow, by the way, I'm going to email everyone a link to set up a more personalized demo. Maybe we could include that 14-day, free trial if there's any of you who want to give that a try as well. it depends on how you learn, I guess. If you're a hands-on learner, you just want to get in there. That's really cool that you have that option to just try it for a couple weeks and see, maybe with just, a certain building that you have or community, and see how it goes. This is really, really awesome. And I love that it has the packages as well in it. So a question I have as well is, and I'm not sure if you mentioned this because I stepped away for a second, but is there any sort of way to have an accounting part of it where you can see who's paid rent or who hasn't through your system?
So unfortunately, no, but we do our integration with many property management tools. We integrate with RealPage, with Yardi, with Rent Manager, and several others. That actually provides that element. So the communications that are being sent here, you'll get a count of them in your records in your property management software. And there you'll be able to see the accounting level too. So it'll combine the data that way.
That's great. That's great. All right. Well, I don't see any more questions coming through. So if you guys have any questions, be sure to put them in now before we let you all go. But again, this whole thing was recorded, so I'm going to email it to you tomorrow, as well as, all the other resources we've talked about, links to the demo and whatnot. So Sneha, you have a little bit more presenting to do, or did I?
We kind of covered it in the demo there.
Okay.
So we've just got some key benefits. We've got some additional examples here. As Alexandra mentioned, we'll be sending out the deck to anyone who would like to receive it, and you'll see some additional features that are available in Notifii. You can either read through the deck, or if you'd like to schedule a demo, one of our product experts will walk through it. Number one tip for going into a demo or suggestion, if there's a particular use case you'd like to see, or you really want to see what it would look like if you set up those automations we talked about, they'll walk you through an entire process. And again, 14-day free trial. We don't need your credit card information, so you can take a look at the software and set up your free trial right there and then with one of our product team.
Great, great. Sneha, is there anything else you want to go over before we let everyone go? Or do you want to just send over the deck tomorrow? I know you have maybe a few more things.
Yeah, I think we're pretty much
okay. Set. Good. All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming on the call, Sneha. Thank you as well. This was really interesting. I hope all of you learned something new and possibly are rethinking how you are communicating with your tenants and how that can help you get your rent paid on time. So I will be in touch with you all tomorrow. Give me about a day. And again, thank you so much, Sneha. This was fantastic.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Take care, everyone. Bye.